have any plans whatsoever, if reelected president, to abuse power, to break the law, to use the government to go after people?
You mean like they're using right now? So, in the history of our country, what's happened to us, again, has never happened before. Over nonsense, over nothing, made up charges.
During a conversation with Sean Hannity, Donald Trump refused to directly deny that he would abuse power if he got elected for a second term. And he did that not once, which he just experienced, he did that twice. Now, before we watch the second time it happened, I think it's important to understand why Democrats and even some Republicans, although they are never Trump Republicans, have concerns about the possibility of Trump dismantling our democratic process and becoming a dictator in the United States. So since launching his 2024 presidential campaign, Trump really hasn't done himself any favors if he wants to avoid that criticism or that fear. For instance, he said that the termination of the Constitution would have been justified in order to overturn the 2020 election. He vowed to use the DOJ, the Justice Department, to prosecute his adversaries, his political opponents, starting with President Biden and his family. And he also told followers, "I am your retribution." Now, in March, the Conservative Political Action Committee, at the Conservative Political Action Committee, Trump told his supporters, quote, "I am your warrior, I am your justice, and for those who have been wronged and betrayed, I am your retribution." Trump even posted on Truth Social, or retruthed, as goofy as that sound, he retruthed an article titled, "A Trump dictatorship is increasingly inevitable, we should stop pretending." He just reposted it, he retruthed it. And so all of these moments are kind of adding up to the fears that Hannity was referencing there and Trump was refusing to directly respond to. Over the past few days, news outlets have begun to sound the alarm on a potential Trump dictatorship, and Trump has continuously brushed off these concerns. So for instance, he wrote this: "The Democrats' disinformation machine is hard at work trying to sell the American public that President Donald J. Trump is a threat to democracy. No, the only threat to democracy is the incompetence and ineptitude of crooked Joe Biden. We are now a failing nation." Now, before we get to the second time Hannity asked him about whether he's thinking about being a dictator, I'm curious what you think about all of this, John, because I think it's telling that he isn't really interested in squashing rumors that he wants to be a dictator, right? It seems like he keeps feeding into that narrative.
Why would he squash him? Like really, like if you're running to be a Democratic candidate, then yeah, you'd probably want to squash rumors that you're going to be a dictator because it's not appealing to the base. But on the other side, it's obviously appealing. There were cheers in the crowd, and he's leading by leaps and bounds over all of the other candidates combined.
That is pretty scary.
So why would he do that? That's what his appeal is. I think a much better question is, why is he not doing more of this? That's all they want. They want to be fed the fantasy that the rich white guy is going to crush everyone who doesn't have those characteristics. So I don't know why he doesn't do more than he already does. I don't know why Sean Hannity was surprised by that response. I mean, I do, he's an idiot, but.
I think that this is a conversation that goes beyond Trump, right? Because while Trump is the catalyst for why this discussion is happening, I think it's worrying that there is some portion of the country, certainly those who are supportive of Donald Trump, who don't really mind the possibility of, I guess, an authoritarian regime, a literal dictatorship, someone who doesn't really value our Constitution or our electoral process. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a combination of things that are accurate and things that they have been lied to about. I mean, I think the easiest explanation is because in that new authoritarian system, they will be on top. I don't think they actually will be, but I think that they believe that. They've been told everything in society should be hierarchical, and oh, what do you know? You're on top of almost all of those hierarchies just by chance of birth. Isn't that great for you? Why not set things up so that those that are at the top of the hierarchies have all of the power? So that would sound really appealing. The issue is that it's all a scam. Like all these random conservatives, yes, they're white. A lot of them are male. They're straight. They're Christian. These are all things where on their own hierarchy, they're at the top. but they're not rich. And that, at the end of the day, is the only reason that the rich ones want to set up the hierarchy that Donald Trump does. So they're gonna find in practice, I think, this system to be a lot less appealing than they think they are. I mean, they will be able to be, I think, mollified a little bit by seeing horrendous subjugation of different out groups that they have been trained to hate and fear. So they'll have that. I mean, they're already loving that in Florida. And so they'll have that, but the system is gonna be set up economically in a way that does not benefit them any more than it currently does. It's always been set up to benefit those at the very top. And so the joke is to some extent on them, but also on all of us.
No, on all of us. Look, guys, the one area where I think there should be agreement among all voters, regardless of their political persuasions, affiliations, is wanting to protect democracy, right? Like, that's the only way ordinary people get a voice in who leads them and who runs the country. This is pretty depressing stuff. Now, I want to get to the last video here where Hannity asks for a second time whether Trump has any interest in serving as a dictator. Let's see how that conversation went down.
You are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
for?
he's going to prison. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border and I want to drill.
That's not retribution. I'm
gonna be, you know, he keeps, I love this guy. He says, you're not gonna be a dictator, are you? I said, no, other than day one. We're closing the border and we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator, okay?
Oh, okay. So does that make you feel better, John? It's just for one day. Just for one day.
I mean, the implication that he thinks it's cool or funny, and that they do too, that he'd be a dictator doesn't make me feel better. The fact that the way he delivered it also made no sense whatsoever doesn't make me feel great. I love that entire thing is just Sean Hannity desperately trying to handhold him
100%.
through producing a soundbite that they could point to and be like, see, he's not gonna be a dictator, forget all the other stuff. And he couldn't do it. It honestly reminds me, and I'll put this in terms that you'll maybe remember. In Family Guy, Peter is being interviewed.
I already love whatever you're saying.
He's being interviewed, and he's telling himself, in response to a question that's coming, don't say doing your wife. Don't say doing your wife. Don't say doing your wife. And he opens up his mouth and says, doing your son? You had one job with this question and answer thing. Don't say being a dictator. Being a dictator on day one? So Sean Hannity, that is the toughest question he's ever gonna ask him, and Trump failed.
Okay, final question for you, because I am genuinely curious what you think about whether our institutions will hold, right? Because even though it was a scary situation, everything that transpired on January 6th, but more importantly, what was happening with the plot to reverse or interfere with the election through the fake elector plot. All of that stuff was awful, but it didn't work, right? And our institutions held. Some would argue that even though Trump might want to dismantle our democratic process and remain in power, our institutions are strong enough to withstand that kind of person, that kind of character. What do you think about that argument?
Yeah, I don't know, but I'm so excited to roll the dice on it. That's gonna be so fun over the next 4 years of the rest of our life. Yeah, look, most people I think would pitch us as, you guys are crazy, you have Trump derangement syndrome, you just pretend everything is so bad. No, we can be nuanced and we can acknowledge. She just acknowledged he wasn't able to overthrow the government on January 6th. We acknowledge that the Supreme Court, while terrible and extreme, doesn't always rule in the worst possible way. We can show nuance, we're not stupid. But I honestly don't know. I mean, the reason that his attempts failed were there were just enough people in key positions, both at the state level and the federal level, to stop him. They are going to be way better at weeding those people out this time around. There are still going to be judges and there are still going to be senators and stuff like that. So it's not like we're defenseless, but we will have far fewer defenses.
Yeah, I appreciate your framing on that, because I think that it isn't helpful to be kind of like hysterical about this threat. I think it's important to be grounded and realistic about what the risks are, and I do think there are risks, but also be realistic about, the